Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Analytical Lion. I'm Josh Davis. Thank you all for joining me. That's another close loss. 0-4 in the Big Ten. It's rough. I'll talk about the Iowa game. I'll talk about moving into the bye week, and then, of course, having Ohio State and Indiana, the top two teams in the country, on deck for a team that really needs a big win. So it's a huge opportunity, but also you're going to have to play better if you expect to be able to win one or both of those games. And then I'll talk about some of the other big games going on around college football. It was a huge Week 8, tons of awesome results around the country. And while Week 9 might not be as exciting in terms of top games, I'll tell you, from the experiences I've had talking on this show, the weeks that you always think are going to be boring are always the most exciting ones. So let's talk about this Iowa game. I'll jump right into things. Listen, right off the bat, Coach Terry Smith, he had the team exuding a lot more energy. He certainly wasn't conservative. I mean, overall, yeah, that's a tough loss, but there was a lot of good to take away from that game. Everyone loved the aggression. He left it all out there. There was no denying that there was a different energy for the team last Saturday. Ethan Grunkmeyer, he looked inexperienced and uncomfortable for most of the game, but he flashed some star potential. Some of the plays he made while on the move especially were electric. I can't wait to see his development for the rest of the season because this is a kid that showed a lot of promise in a really tough first game. But that is the key though, right? Because promise has to turn into results. When the defense holds a team to 25 points and 300 yards, you expect to win. The 2 interceptions, the 2 turnovers on downs, those were critical. Those were the main reasons why Penn State didn't win this game. Grunk needs to get better with downfield throws. I loved how Penn State wasn't afraid to take big shots, but Grunk didn't connect on any of them, and none of them looked like... It never looked like Grunk was super comfortable taking those downfield shots, especially when you have guys like Devontae Ross, Trevor Pena, Kyner Hudson, Kobe Howard, some guys that have the talent and speed to get downfield and get open. Yeah, that's a really tough Iowa defense, but you're about to go play the 2 best teams in the country. You have to be able to generate big plays offensively downfield. It's got to be north-south. So much of what I'm seeing with this offense is the only guy who's getting north-south is Kaytron Allen. Otherwise, all the receivers, any good plays it feels like they're making, it's not over the middle making nice plays. It's not being open downfield and connecting on bombs. It's all side-to-side stuff. And everyone's talking about, I don't like Coach Kotelnicki because he's calling so many gadget plays. And then the gadget plays are the only things that's working. When you're creating misdirection, when you're going side to side, that's the only way to get guys out open in space right now. If you're trying to call power runs with Nick Singleton, in the past that used to be good for 1 or 2 big plays a game. That just hasn't been the case, and now as we saw against Iowa, Nick Singleton's just not even getting chances to make plays anymore. That's disappointing. Because going into this season, I was one of those people that was talking about Nick Singleton being a top 3, maybe top 1 back in the country. This was a guy that I thought he was going to go out and take over the Penn State run game and break the Penn State rushing record, surpass Saquon Barkley in terms of his resume and image at Penn State. And instead, this season for Nick Singleton has been the complete opposite. That's what's so disappointing is because everyone's expectations for him are so high. And you can only wonder if that's due to Sider going to Notre Dame. I don't know. Because obviously you see what Notre Dame's doing with their running back group. It's incredible what Coach Sider's done in year 1 with such a talented group. But here at Penn State, Kaytron Allen, he's really the only back or only player on this team that's getting north-south. And he did take over the running back room. He got 28 carries to Singleton's 6. Allen had 145 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 5.2 yards per carry. It's over 5 yards per carry again. He's incredible. And you can see how much he wants to win. You can tell he's not going to give up. some of the post-game interviews with him, it's like he's just got a dog mentality. He's going to go out there and give 100%. It doesn't matter what the team's record is. It doesn't matter if they're competing for a national championship or if they're competing for a 6-6 bowl game. He's going to go out there and give 100%. And I was really confused by the infatuation from Andy Kotelnicki with the multi-quarterback setups. We saw this in the past. If you've watched him even in his time with Buffalo and Kansas, he infused this into his offenses. Of course, everyone remembers the situation with Drew Aller and Bo Prabula last season and how dynamic that was. That was entertaining to watch. That was effective because you had two very clear different backs, two guys that had such different skill sets. You could actually have almost two different offenses, and that made Penn State so hard to prepare for opposing teams. That was last year, when you had a clear pocket passer who was elite and a clear dual-threat quarterback who was elite. This year, we started with Drew Aller, and that's just how it was. And it made sense, right? He was the clear top quarterback in the room, and now we can understand after watching Ethan Grunkmeyer for a start against the top Iowa defense on the road. He's young. He's inexperienced. He's got a lot to work on. Yes, he's very talented, but he is not Drew Aller in terms of that's where he's at in his career. He's not as refined yet. However, Grunk is very athletic, and he can make plays. He's a very creative player. He's a dog out there. He's got a wonderful mentality, and I think in a couple years or even by the end of this season, he could be at the point where he's ready to win big games. The big thing is when you start inserting Jackson Smolik out there, it completely takes away Grunk's consistency and rhythm. This is something that Bo Prabula and Drew Aller have been interviewed and asked a lot about ever since they split up last season. How did using both of them on the same team impact their ability to make plays? And it was very clear from both of them. I think it helped Bo because it gave him a chance to showcase his abilities, but I don't think it actually helped either of them in the long run in terms of the actual success they were able to have last season. So in terms of if you want to develop Gronk, great, but you have to commit to that. I didn't see anything from Jackson Smolik in the Iowa game that made me believe he had to be on the field, especially over Grunk. Because I don't believe that Jackson Smolik offers anything completely different than what Grunk offers. That's the big difference, is if Grunk is some 6'5" pocket passer and he's not able to move around, then sure, bring in the mobile guy. That makes sense for a few plays, or run some two quarterback setups, whatever. I don't think that taking Grunk out of the game ever benefited Penn State against Iowa. And I think if you want to call some trick plays where it involves a running quarterback, Grunk's already in there. That's my take on that. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe having Smolik out there is good. Hopefully Smolik's okay. I heard some things about him being injured. So maybe we're forced to just use Grunk from now on. Of course, we didn't have Vega Ione in that game, our best offensive lineman. It seems like he'll be back by the time we play Ohio State and Columbus in a few weeks. That was a big loss on the offensive line. Kobe Howard, he finally got a nice catch. My question here is, will we see his involvement continue to grow? He's someone that I thought was going to have a big impact on this team this season, and now with him not having almost any impact until this game, it's pretty obvious he's the guy who's been working with Grunk all season so far, in practices and camp. Those two have been connecting a lot. It's a big thing to watch because obviously other receivers have not been dominating. I don't want to single out any of the receivers and say they've been doing bad because that's not the case. But none of the receivers have really stuck out. Dite has probably been the best in the last 2-3 weeks. And I really thought Trevor Pena was going to be a guy who would go for 8-9 catches a game. We just haven't been able to get the ball in his hands. And then Kyron Hudson, I don't know what's going on with him, because this is a guy that I thought was going to be one of the top receivers in the country after watching him the first 3 weeks. He was fantastic in those non-conference games. And as soon as we've gotten into Big Ten play, it's been a struggle for him to get the ball in his hands. We've thrown at him a few times. I think it's more been on the quarterback's inaccuracy there. Obviously, having Grunk in there isn't going to help him. But I think Kobe Howard needs to have more involvement. I think we need to say him and Desir Denmark need a chance. They need an opportunity. They at least need we need to see what they can offer in a starting situation, because the current trio of transfer receivers haven't been cutting it in terms of getting the offense going. The defense played really well as a whole, but they just couldn't contain the quarterback at the end of the game again. This has been a recurring issue not just for Penn State this season, but for Jim Knowles in past seasons with other schools. Even until late in his tenures at Oklahoma and Ohio State, Knowles' defenses have lacked the ability to contain mobile quarterbacks. And I also want to point this out, that they mentioned on the Peacock broadcast, which, by the way, was disappointingly badly run. I expect more from an NBC broadcast, even if it's on Peacock. For a big game like Penn State, Iowa, that was rough. But for Jim Knowles, this is a guy who his system has been so complex that he has had to basically dumb it down his first maybe season or two. He has had almost 100-yard per game improvement at each of his stops from year 1 to year 2. He has vastly improved his defenses in year 2 everywhere he's been. I remember just a few years ago when he was at Ohio State, in year 1, when he came in, and all the Ohio State fans saying, "Why did we get this Jim Knowles guy? Our defense is terrible." He hadn't fully installed it yet. And then a few years later, he's winning a national championship, and he has one of the best defenses in Ohio State history. So I think you got to be really patient with him. And I know there's a lot of Penn State fans saying, "Why are we paying him, X amount of money, millions and millions of dollars, to be giving up all these points and all these yards? And why can't we just tackle a quarterback?" Listen, once the play breaks down, once the quarterback's out of the pocket, that's no longer his scheming. He can't do anything. He's up there in the booth. Now it's down to the guys to make a play, whether it's having a QB spy, whether it's just being able to contain in terms of the second level collapsing. That's just something this defense hasn't been able to do, and it's really tough for any defense. There are very few defenses that can consistently contain really good mobile quarterbacks. The issue is when it's Nico Iamaleava, you're like, okay, that's a really talented guy. I can understand why he's dicing us up. When it's Mark Gronowski, that's when it becomes an issue, when he's the one running all over you in the fourth quarter. And I do want to point this out. Zakee Wheatley, A.C. Collins, A.J. Harris, Deshaun Lane, and Xavier Gilliam, they all had wonderful games on the defensive side of the ball. Wanted to point this out because like 80-90% of this team is playing top-notch football. It's the other 10% that is really bringing the team down. And if you know anything about football, you know 100% of your team has to be balling in order for you to have success. If there's one or two guys that aren't playing at a premier level, especially in the Big Ten, opposing teams are going to figure it out, and they're going to attack them all day long. And right now we have not been able to plug those holes. And it doesn't help when guys are getting injured, your head coach is having to leave, and you're replacing him with an interim. It's been tough. And obviously now, like looking ahead, Penn State has a well-timed bye week to reset, get the guys some extra practices. Then it's two massive opportunities against the number 1 and number 2 teams in college football. I want to make this really clear. A win over Ohio State or Indiana would completely change the narrative on Terry Smith and this team. This is a special chance for this team. We all know they're talented enough to achieve their goals, but right now it's all about the execution and the grit to get things done. Ohio State, they've looked like just the most controlled team in college football. They look so relaxed. It starts from the coaching staff, where it looks like Ryan Day. He's been able to focus on the little things and the details of the program after winning a national title, because the noise that had been bothering him in years past has just dwindled away. And now he could focus on football and say, these are the things we have to do to win games. It's just become so easy for him to focus on the little things because of the noise. It's just gone. And that stems from then the development of a young quarterback, where the little nitpicky things that a lot of fan bases would be annoyed with early on, not so much the case. And it's easy when you're the number one team in the country. And it's easy when you had a big win early in the season against maybe an overrated Texas team. And it's easy when you can go on the road and you figured that out and get some nice wins. That's a program that is basically controlling the game better than any program in the country right now. And it's not particularly close. They're going into games and they just know exactly how to win. And they have the talent to just execute it and get it done. So Ohio State is one of those teams where if you're going to beat them, you're going to need to do something completely different. And it's the one thing that I think Penn State benefits from now is that, yeah, Drew Aller's gone. Yeah, Franklin's gone. But it makes your program a little different. And off of this bye week, I think this team can completely cook up some different things and throw some new looks at Ohio State. It's the only way you're going to be able to win that game. And then for Indiana, you're looking at that and you're just saying, that's a program that's just dominating at the line of scrimmage. They're just so energized. They're like a team in March Madness in basketball, where they're just red hot and they just can't miss. That's Indiana right now. Every play they're doing just works. And they're dominating at the line of scrimmage. They're winning physically. They have talent all over the field. And what's key is they're so cohesive. The trust in every single person on that team is so key. They have no 5 stars. It's the complete opposite of Ohio State, where Ohio State's just using so much talent and executing and just not making mistakes. Indiana's got a group that is so trusting in each other. They're going to go out there and just dominate. They're not going to fret over the mistakes they make because they believe in themselves to make the big plays so frequently and so often that it actually happens. And when you have a coach like Curt Cignetti who just made a bag and who you can rally around, and his personality and his I'd just love to be in the locker room for some of those speeches, because the way that he juices up those guys on that team, it's easy to play for him. And it's easy to play for Indiana right now when they're doing all the right things. So that's a team where, yeah, it's going to be the first time that Penn State's playing at home for a while. It's probably going to be 5 losses in a row coming into that game. Of course, we could beat Ohio State, but it's probably going to be 5 losses in a row going into that game. That's something where that is going to really be the gut check for Penn State. Can you hang in there? I'm not sure, because this is an Indiana team that I feel like Iowa showed that Indiana on the road could be a little vulnerable, and then they went into Oregon and just decimated them. Indiana is still an inconsistent team. They still are okay with making mistakes. If you capitalize on every little mistake they make, you can completely change the narrative and flip the game on them to where it's not about, okay, how many big plays is Indiana going to make? If you make them focus on the mistakes that they're making, I think you can be able to beat them. And that comes with just Penn State making no mistakes. That stems from, in the Iowa game, committed only 2 penalties, 15 yards of penalties. It stems from the turnovers. Got to clean those up. Listen, if Grunk is going to be able to lead this Penn State team into winning one of these games, he can't commit any turnovers. It's not just the interceptions either. It's having clean snaps and at the mesh point with the handoffs, and there were some issues with fumbles that Penn State was fortunate to not lose any of those. but got to take care of the football. Got to convert on fourth down. So yeah, I'll be talking about those games in depth. Two huge opportunities for Penn State to make waves in the college football scene and get back to what they think they can do. This is still such a talented team. They just got to get it done. And like I said, I think if you win one of those games, especially if it's the Ohio State game, if Terry Smith and Ethan Grunkmeyer are able to do the one thing that James Franklin and Drew Aller couldn't do, it would be beating Ohio State. And if they can do that, I think it would completely change the narrative on this team. I don't want to say people would completely forget about the shortcomings earlier on in the season, but it would make it a lot easier to swallow that pill of, okay, yeah, we'd be like 4-4, but we just beat Ohio State. I'm going to talk about the huge Week 8 around college football, recapping some of the important results, and then I'll preview some of the games for Week 9. First off, Miami, they went down on Friday night. Carson Beck, he threw 4 interceptions. Miami looked abysmal against an unranked Louisville team. I'm surprised they stayed in the top 10 in the new AP poll. Obviously, we have the college football playoff rankings coming out soon. That's the more important set of rankings. But this has been the thing with Miami lately. The moment you think they're decent, they throw an embarrassing game. They remind everyone of their true colors. Games at SMU and Pitt are Miami's toughest games left. It wouldn't surprise me if they lost one of those. But obviously, they have a pretty easy path to making the playoffs or an ACC title game. Texas A&M allowed 42 points to Arkansas, but they escaped with a win. Usually, the number 3 team in the country has a better defense, but A&M is now the last undefeated SEC team, and they don't play a top 10 team the rest of the season. Georgia survived a thriller against Ole Miss. Gunnar Stockton was fantastic. He outscored the Rebels 17-0 in the fourth quarter. The SEC continues to beat up on itself. This is the big example of, I was talking earlier on in the season, I will do a full playoff preview next week again. I did one after Week 5. I'm going to do one here after Week 9. But I was saying so many SEC teams are going to beat up on each other. I'd be surprised if you had any undefeateds at the end. Obviously, A&M's the last chance for that to happen. I'd be even surprised if there were very many 11-1 teams. I think there will be a 10-2 SEC team in the SEC title game. And then obviously if that team loses that game and is 10-3 with a loss in the SEC title game, are they in the playoffs? That becomes the tough conversation because there will be several 10-2 teams in the SEC vying for playoff spots. There will even be some 9-3 teams in the conversation. So then it becomes a resume thing, it becomes an eye test thing. It's all about who's impressed the playoff committee. It'll be really interesting to see the committee's first rankings here coming out soon. Alabama took down Tennessee at home. They moved back up into the top 5 after 4 straight ranked wins. I've been hesitant to say this. I think it's time to admit Bama's back. Their big games the rest of the year are LSU and Oklahoma. Both of them are at home. The Tide, they seem in position for the playoffs. Arizona State, they threw a wrench into the Big 12 with their clutch win over top 10 Texas Tech. The Sun Devils move back into the rankings, and they don't play a ranked team the rest of the season. If they were to run to the table and win the Big 12, that would take Kenny Dillingham, my top candidate for the Penn State coaching job, off of the table. So Penn State fans actually need to root for Arizona State to not make the playoffs. Vanderbilt moves back into the top 10 with a nice win over LSU. They're now 6-1 with their only loss, a close one to Bama. They're a real playoff contender. LSU, on the other hand, their next game is in Tuscaloosa, and if they lose that one, I think we can forget about the Tigers' playoff chances. Georgia Tech remains undefeated with a strong win over Duke. They move up to number 7 in the country, and they're now the top-ranked team in the ACC. For the Big 12, BYU edged out Utah in their rivalry game, and BYU is now the top-ranked team in the Big 12. Notre Dame dominated USC in their rivalry game with Jeremiah Love collecting over 250 all-purpose yards. The Irish defense has improved vastly from where they were at a few weeks ago, and their toughest games left are Navy and Pitt, so Notre Dame seems back on track for a playoff bid. Finally, Memphis lost to UAB, which complicates things for the American Conference and the Group of 5 playoff spot. Talk about Memphis again here in a minute, because now it's time to move on to Week 9. There's some big games in the SEC and the American Conference, but there are no top 10 matchups this week, which I mentioned at the beginning of the show. That means it's a crazy week in college football. At noon, there's number 8 Ole Miss at number 13 Oklahoma, a battle between two one-loss SEC teams. John Mateer has now had a few weeks to recover from his injury, and the Sooners need him to be at his best in this one. Oklahoma has one of the best defenses in the country, though, and will look to stifle Trinidad Chambliss and Lane Kiffin's offense. Also at noon, it's a big-time matchup in the American Conference when number 18 USF heads to Memphis. I mentioned just a minute ago that Memphis lost last week, so this is a crucial game for these teams atop of the Group of 5 standings. I know it's weird to think about. This game has major playoff implications, and whoever wins this has a really strong chance of making the final tournament. At 3:30, number 15 Missouri heads to Nashville to take on number 10 Vanderbilt. It is where College Game Day is going. A QB battle between Bo Pribula and Diego Pavia is enough reason to tune in, but these might be the two most physical defenses in the SEC as well. This one's going to be a lot of fun, and if I haven't said this enough already, the winner of this game is in prime playoff position. Finally, at night, number 3 Texas A&M heads to Death Valley to take on LSU. We know of LSU's struggles on the road this year, but they're still one of the better teams in the country at home, and Tiger Stadium at night is a really tough environment. This is possibly LSU's last chance to stay relevant for the playoffs, but Marcel Reed and the undefeated Aggies have simply found ways to win this season. It hasn't been pretty, but 7-0 in the SEC is impressive, and their schedule has them not playing a top 10 team all season. All right, I'll give you all a bonus game, because at 8 o'clock, 6-1 Houston goes to Arizona State for an important matchup in the Big 12. The Sun Devils just upset Texas Tech, and both of these teams have just one loss in conference. Connor Weigman has been electric for the Cougs, and Arizona State is their last top 25 team on their schedule. Whoever wins this game is probably in the Big 12 title game against the winner of Texas Tech BYU in a few weeks. And then before I sign off, I got one more thing to talk about. I've been saving it to surprise you all. It's basketball season. Imagine that. Penn State, they just had their first exhibition game against Dayton yesterday. They lost 62-78. And then they have an exhibition game against Shippensburg on Sunday. It's free at the BJC. If you want to watch free Penn State basketball and you want to get an early preview of seeing what this team looks like, make sure to show up and support the team at the BJC on Sunday. Listen, I watched the game against Dayton. There was some good, some bad. The new freshman point guard, Caden Mingo, the top recruit in Penn State history, scored 18 points. He looked really good. He's going to be a key piece in this Penn State team. He looks like a leader already, even though he's a true freshman. Outside of that, you got a couple of transfers like Josh Reed from Cincinnati. You got Eli Rice, who was on the team last year, but he was hurt all year, so this is his first year playing. He's a former transfer from Nebraska. But then the rest of the squad, it's made up of a lot of European guys. You got big dudes like Ivan Juric. It's stacked in terms of the amount of Euro guys on the squad. Early in the season, it'll be really important to see how they fit in terms of as a team, but there's a lot of talent. And I think it's really crucial for Mike Rhodes to be able to develop this, because if he can have success with these Euro guys in year one with them, I think it can almost create a pipeline there. It's been obviously difficult to recruit for Penn State basketball, being able to generate a pipeline for Euro guys could be the key to easy recruiting for Penn State down the line. Because think about this. A lot of these guys, they're not as highly recruited. You're not having to compete with other schools as much if they're all the way across the pond. And the other thing is they might not require as much NIL efforts, which obviously Penn State basketball is lacking right now. Scott Pera, the new basketball GM, he's done a fantastic job so far building this roster. It'll be really interesting to see how they perform. Hopefully early this season they can generate some chemistry and play well. I think this team has a lot more potential than a lot of people are giving them credit for. They were preseason ranked by CBS Sports last in the Big Ten. I think this team has a lot more chances to make the tournament. I think we got to see it before I start predicting it. Because obviously that loss to Dayton early on, it was not pretty. They shot 18% from the three-point line. The interior presence, there's a lot of forward size. There's not a ton of center size. You don't have a guy like Yannick Konen-Niederhauser anymore where he's just going to be one of the best centers in the country. You don't have that. Obviously, if Yannick came back, that would have been huge. But now you're relying on guys like Jurich and Justin Hauser to man the paint. I don't know how well that's going to do. And so this might be a very guard-led team. This might be a forward-led team where you're having to have your top ball handlers score a lot of points. You're going to have to shoot the ball well to win games. And so it'll be interesting to see early on how well that works in terms of shooting the basketball. Because obviously you don't have elite shooters everywhere. So you're going to have to play really well as a team. You're going to have to play really strong defense, which we know Coach Rhodes and the rest of the staff is going to really harp on them for. I don't know if there's going to be soft defense in the Bryce Jordan Center this season. But this is a team where it'll be really interesting to see how they do early on, because I think that'll be a really good pulse for where they're at later on in the season. I'm really excited for it. I don't think enough people are talking about this Penn State basketball team right now. And so, if you want Penn State basketball news and information and you want somebody to help you follow the team this season, I'm right here, man. I got you all. Tune into the Analytic Line weekly, and I'll have Penn State basketball stuff for you the rest of the season all the way through. I'm Josh Davis. Thank you all for watching. Enjoy the bye week. Hopefully you enjoy watching some college football games other than Penn State. And I'll make sure to see you all at the BJC on Sunday to watch some free Penn State hoops. That'll be all. Thank you all for watching. And as always, go Nittany Lions.